Warhammer 3 is out officially now, and a massive player base of over 150,000 concurrent gamers were taking their first dives into campaign and multiplayer over the weekend. A large portion of that player base has been thoroughly enjoying themselves, and there's a lot to love here, but the release has been anything but perfect, with battleless servers straight up not working, performance issues flaring up across a wide variety of systems, and bugs. Bugs galore. Bugs everywhere. Warhammer 3 is lacking some polish currently. It has some weird design decisions, and for some people anyway, seems to discourage replayability, because the Realms of Chaos campaign forces you to engage in its objectives at a frenetic pace, even when you just want to chill and build an empire at your own pace. Say what you want about the Great Vortex campaign, it was a lot easier to ignore the race in Game 2 and pop in at the last moment to stop your enemies from winning. It's way more of a hassle, and the punishment is way more severe in Game 3, and frankly, that needs to change. It's no fun having your pimped out legendary lord constantly end turn spamming in the Dark Prince's realm, taking attrition in Nurgle's realm, or waiting around in your capital for those pesky negative traits to disappear, especially when all you want to do is paint the map and just play the freaking game. Everyone's going to have a different perspective on that. Some people will love it, others will hate it, but there's one thing that most of us can get on board with: our excitement for the combined campaign, because it's the final act, the culmination of years of hard work and content, all merged into one glorious map. And thankfully, it seems like there's a lot of good news to deliver on that front. Behold, Immortal Empires in all its majesty, a world-spanning global campaign stretching from Nagaroth and Lustria in the west to Ind and the hinterlands of Koresh in the east. Want to give a big shout out and thank you to Cathay Zero, Sarkwan, Asa TJ, Penakoto, and anyone else I might have missed who have helped compile all this info into a very digestible format. It is very much appreciated. And, initial impressions here, this map is glorious. It's pretty much exactly what people have been waiting for. An enormous playing space with entire continents, a fully fleshed out Cathay, a delectable looking Darklands, and plenty of opportunity for expansions and new races. The blueprint for a series that has another 5 years left in it. Easy. 500 provinces, some of them completely new and never seen before. It looks amazing. Now, we have been told by Pete from Creative Assembly this is an old prototype and not necessarily the exact Immortal Empires map we'll see when it inevitably launches. But if I recall correctly, the Great Vortex map was datamined a month before its release, and they basically said the exact same thing then, that it's not final. They reserved the right to make some changes. Well, it ended up being pretty much a one-to-one translation once it dropped. So even if some changes do indeed end up happening, this should be quite close to the final experience. So the most useful map we can take a look at right now is an overlay that shows exactly how much land is being gained and being lost between Game 2 and Game 3. And there's some interesting elements to note here. The old world itself is almost the exact same in terms of size and shape, which is logical. It's arguably the most important area of the Warhammer Fantasy Battle world, home to the most diversity and density when it comes to races and playable start positions. So if any area of the map needed to be full-sized and completely lore accurate, the old world would be a good place to start. You'll notice that there is some squishing in areas being cut, most notably in the Southlands, Ulthuan, and the northeast coast of Lustria, but in some of these situations, the continents are actually gaining more total landmass or settlements. Ulthuan, for example, is undoubtedly smaller than it was in Mortal Empires, but has gained more settlements in the process, with the Vrest being split into its northern and southern portions like in the Vortex map. Lustria has had the northeastern portion of the continent shaved down, but has had 6 new provinces added, including the Turtle Isles, the Kulchen Plains, and the Cape of Lustria, mostly made up of Vortex provinces that were not present in Mortal Empires. Now, the Southlands have taken some pretty huge cuts here, and it's nowhere near as wide laterally as it used to be, but again, it hasn't really lost anything in terms of settlements. It's just much denser now, with major cities on the continent being closer together. That can be a good or bad thing, depending on your viewpoint. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Araby, Devil's Backbone, the Kingdom of Beasts, it's all still there. It's just presumably going to be easier to march from one settlement to the next, which, again, comes with the potential downside of even more sieges and even less open land battle scenarios, but should make for quite the action-packed area for Krotgar, the Tomb Kings, and anybody else coming to join the party. but a lot more has been gained here than lost overall, especially when you look at the size of Cathay, the Darklands, the Southern Chaos Wastes, and of course, Ind, and the hinterlands of Koresh, which should be exciting for the vast majority of the player base that's watching this video. Now, I know Andy Hall came out and said that Cathay was a one-time thing, that it likely won't ever happen again for any of these other Eastern factions, but where there's smoke, there's fire. We've talked about that before, and it doesn't make much sense to leave the door open for map expansions in this way if there's no desire or possibility of them coming in the future. They could just be hedging their bets, leaving the door open, but typically these things get planned out years in advance, and I'd say maybe he's telling the truth, but it was an informal interview. I would not take it as gospel, especially when we're looking at their freaking homelands on the map. Realistically, why build the contents there if you never have any intention of ever possibly looking into creating those factions? I think the door is not shut on this case at all. And naturally, those areas will be shrouded in the Fog of War, similar to the Darklands and Nehekara in Game 2, so those are not playable areas yet. They aren't fleshed out with regions or cities or sub-factions or anything like that, but it would not shock me if they become playable at least a couple years down the line. Curiously, there is no Nippon or Lost Isles of Elephas either, which could mean there's zero plans to expand the map there, or perhaps CA's tech has changed enough that creating new areas is possible, even if it won't be shrouded in the Fog of War. I think we won't know that until a little bit longer into the life cycle of Warhammer 3. Now, I don't think anyone should go into this expecting that 3 or 4 new races that were never truly official will get added, but even with a race like Nippon, I'm kind of feeling like Dumb and Dumber here, where Jim Carrey says, "So you're saying there's a chance?" That's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm thinking there's a chance for all these races, and obviously 2 or 3 years ago, we would have never expected any of this could possibly be happening. So very exciting that there's potential here and that their areas are represented on the map, at least when it comes to Ind and the hinterlands of Koresh. Now, accessible oceans on both sides of the world is a really good sign too. Following up on my video from a few weeks back, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll be able to get west by going east or vice versa. We're just looking at a map right now. We're not covering mechanics or features. We don't know what will be coming on that front, but it doesn't look like the map just cuts off at the coastlines for Nagaroth, Lustria, and Cathay respectively, which means there's a good shot they're thinking about opening up the world instead of making it a hard boundary that no one can traverse. Yes, it's possible the demonic teleport system from Realms of Chaos will make its way into the combined campaign too, but if you remember, none of the Vortex mechanics were implemented in Mortal Empires, and the combined campaign doesn't have a narrative. Apparently, Andy Hall said that the Realms of Chaos will still be present in Immortal Empires, but they are not showing up on this map, and we don't know what role they will play, because presumably the Demon Prince souls will not play a factor in that campaign at all. So if the demonic portals return, I'm not sure how I feel about any faction being able to instantly teleport anywhere in the world. Might get a bit silly. I want the map to open up and allow the eastern and western sides to interact with each other, but instant teleports to anywhere in the world every 25 turns or whatever might be a bit much. But then again, they might completely overhaul how the demonic portals work, because obviously you're going to want demonic invasions. You're going to want those demon factions to be able to interact with the Game 1 and Game 2 races, but in what capacity, I'm not really sure yet. It probably will not be tied to Ursun's Roar, because again, there is no narrative in the combined campaign. So I think the shipping lanes and ocean mechanic that allows Cathay to sail to Lustria would be a more logical and less arcadey inclusion than just instantly teleporting from Altdorf to Lustria, whenever those demonic portals actually materialize. Now, the Southern Chaos Wastes means Beast Fiends and Angry Mutant Penguins confirmed, baby, 4 entirely new provinces in the Southern Chaos Wastes. This part of the world has never been fleshed out in any of the other maps. It's comprised of the Icefire Plains, the Demonium Hills, the Southern Wastes, and the Abyssal Glacier. So that in and of itself is very cool. I'll be quite curious to see if any lords get moved down there, or if it will instead be the home base for some coming DLC lords. I think that is probably likely, but I would not be shocked if maybe 1 or 2 lords get kicked down there as well. And Cathay gained a bunch in the transition from Realms of Chaos as well, including the jungles of Qian, Mount Li and the plains of Shen, likely bordering the stomping grounds of the Monkey King and Li Dao the Fire Dragon. The Immortal Empires version of Cathay is already shaping up to be quite a bit more interesting than its current equivalent, because Fu Chao is in, home of Yin Yin the Azure Dragon. The jungles are there and available to play in, which will give us some new biomes to mess around with too, and their economy will likely get even better with the additional areas to expand and make use of all the ports on their eastern coast, which are not available in the current Realms of Chaos campaign. Now for the Darklands, the Desolation of Asgore has been added. That is a clear hint at Drazoat the Ashen and the Legion of Asgore coming soon to a campaign near you, and at least on paper, it looks quite a bit more expansive than the somewhat squished area we have in the Realms of Chaos campaign. I cannot wait to see what the Darklands look like once the Chaos Dwarfs, the Dawizar, are added. It's one of those pieces of Warhammer Fantasy lore that haven't really been represented in any form of media at all. There aren't really novels about it. There aren't really images that we see about it. There's not really much official artwork for it either. Seeing a fully fleshed out, magma-infused Tsar Nagrund rising from the wastelands like a Babylonian ziggurat from hell, it's gonna make me a horny boy. I mean, literally, I can feel the horns growing on my head right now. So here's a picture of what the world map will look like once all the lords from game 1, 2, and 3 are added. And remember, that is without the coming storm of DLC and Free LC, the Chaos Dwarf expansion, the likely Nagash and Neferata expansion, a bunch of Chaos Lords being added to the northern and southern wastes, and of course that huge hole in the Darklands that's currently devoid of anything interesting, but will almost assuredly be filled with Chaos Dwarf Lords, perhaps even before Immortal Empires launches, which is really the big question here, right? We know the map itself is shaping up to be fantastic. There's an absurd amount of content there already, basically the whole world as our playground and a place to escape to when the objectives of that Chaos campaign get too annoying, which for some of you, they already are. But when is Immortal Empires coming out? Well, I'm expecting the Dawizar and maybe 1 or 2 Lord packs before the combined campaign is ready to go. And looking at how expansive, how massive this campaign map is, alongside the fact that there's a ton of work for CA to do in terms of improving performance, fixing bugs, and generally making the experience better for a wide section of their player base, it would not shock me in the slightest if we're looking at a 4 to 7 month gap from release date in mid-February to Immortal Empires Day in summer or early fall. They only get to unveil the final combined campaign once. Make sure you do it right, because for many of us, Immortal Empires is why we invested in this series. It is the map. Realms of Chaos is great, it's cool, but it is a stopgap to hold us over until that combined campaign vision is fully realized. So yeah, take your time with it, work out the kinks. There's no rush right now. Support the game well, work on some patches, improve the overall experience, give us some good DLC and Free LC once some major stuff has been ironed out, and then we can get around to Immortal Empires in, say, half a year's time. If you can bang out a high quality one faster, by all means, go for it, but take your time on it and make sure when it hits the spot just right. I'm very happy with what we're seeing from the combined campaign right now. I just hope CA will fully deliver on that front. So let me know what you all think, and I will see you all in the next video. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.